In today's Legal on 4, protecting yourself legally when you rent out your home. More and more people are becoming landlords because they own property that they can't sell or don't want to sell right now in this market. Is there any way to reduce your liability? Our legal contributor Craig Wisnom is here to talk about the LLC, a limited liability company. Tell us about that.
Well, suppose your White House depreciates down to $230 billion or whatever it is, and you decide, you know, I can't sell it, I want to rent it out. As a landlord, one of the questions people often think about when they're getting legal advice is, do I put this into a corporation or an LLC? And a corporation used to be one of the few ways you had to protect yourself as a business owner, and that's the way all businesses were set up. More recently, the limited liability companies have come into play, and it is essentially the corporate format that's a little bit simpler for people to operate in. It's relatively recent, and it's a way to set up a business.
Okay, so basically, how does it work?
Well, it works somewhat like a corporation. You create an LLC, which you normally would do through a lawyer. You pick a name, you say, I'm going to have this be Craig's, residential real estate LLC, and I go on the Corporation Commission website and make sure there's not one already called that.
Right.
And you file the forms with the Corporation Commission, you do some documents, and you have now a company. So you transfer your real estate into the name of that company, and now that's the owner of your home, and that company now rents out the real estate to your renters.
And how does that protect you from liability?
Well, it's kind of the old basic corporate liability idea, which is why corporations have been around for a long time, in that if someone gets hurt or the corporation has some liability based on its business, you're not going to be liable just because you're the owner. So if you're the owner of this LLC and it owns the property and someone slips and falls and sues the company, you and your other assets aren't necessarily going to be liable because of this debt for the corporation.
But it's not bulletproof.
It's not bulletproof. In fact, most liability and protection is not bulletproof. You always want to have good insurance in place and things to protect you. And one thing is, you're always kind of liable for what you do. So even if your company, your LLC owns this property, but you're the person taking care of it and you're the one, mowing the grass and fixing the sidewalk, and someone hurts themselves and said, hey, you did a bad job fixing the sidewalk and that's why I broke my leg, you could still be liable for your actions even though you're not liable as the owner of the rental real estate.
Interesting. And how expensive is it to set up an LLC? Well,
depending on whether you go through a lawyer or not, the fees involved are normally at least a few $100s just with the Corporation Commission and the cost of getting the documents published. If you go through an attorney, it's probably about an extra $1,000 to do a relatively simple LLC.
And is this something that people can do through the internet on their own?
They can, like a lot of things. You can always try to set something up that way. It may or may not be the best way to do it for you, and you may not understand, the benefits and the niceties. So it can work that way, like a lot of things, but you don't have as much of a guarantee as when you work with a professional.
So a PC and an LLC.
A PC is a corporation that's set up just for professionals, which is doctors, lawyers, architects, those type of things. So that's actually a corporation, and it's just there's a special segment for those that are professionals. The professional version of an LLC is a PLC. So you'll see doctors, lawyers' offices, engineers, things like that. You'll see them sometimes PC, sometimes PLC.
And the main reason these are set up is to protect you against liability.
Exactly, as much as you possibly can. It's one more thing on your side of if you get sued, you'd rather have it in that way than not. At least gives you one more thing to argue about.
All right. Thank you so much, Craig.
Thank you, Martha.
And I guess next week, this is a two-parter, because next time we're going to talk about leases and other legal issues.
Exactly. If you're a landlord, some of the other things you need to be aware of when you're renting.
So important to have a lease, and one that's easily readable and not full of little...
And knowing what it has to have in it.
Oh, perfect.
So.
Okay. Thank you so much. Well,